Today, we're going to venture into one of the most profound and frankly persistent questions of human thought. It's a question that really touches the very foundation of our existence, our perception, and the world we all inhabit. We'll explore that ancient philosophical denial of matter, and we will counter it, not with more rhetoric, but with the cold, hard, and utterly unforgiving laws of physics.
And this really is the fundamental query, isn't it? For millennia, mystics, theologians, and philosophers have suggested that the universe we touch and see and feel is not the ultimate reality, that it is in fact a grand deception, a cosmic dream, just a shadow play projected for our senses. But what does a claim like that truly mean when it's confronted with the world as we actually experience it?
So let's dive into this thought experiment. This is the moment where abstract philosophy collides, quite literally, with physical reality. And this single question, well, it's going to serve as the crucible for our entire investigation, the ultimate test against which all claims of immateriality will be measured.
Now, our path today is a very structured one. We'll begin by defining the core philosophical error, what we're calling the ontological fallacy. Then we'll trace its history, expose the misuse of modern science, examine the hypocrisy of its adherents, champion the power of direct experience, and finally arrive at the ultimate physical proof. So we begin then with our central thesis that to deny matter is a form of philosophical hubris. It is an intellectual arrogance which proclaims the primacy of mind over existence. It's a worldview that might seem profound within a lecture hall, but it completely disintegrates upon contact with the non-negotiable laws that govern our universe.
You know, this principle, famously articulated by the writer Philip K. Dick, lies right at the heart of our analysis. It draws a very stark line between subjective belief and objective existence. You see, one may choose to believe that gravity is an illusion, but that belief will not prevent a fall. Reality possesses an authority that is entirely and utterly indifferent to our opinion of it.
And this gets to the very heart of the matter. The laws of physics, they're not suggestions. They aren't open to interpretation in the way a philosophical text might be. Kinetic energy, momentum, force, these are measurable, quantifiable, and unforgiving realities. They are, in the end, the final arbiters in any dispute between mind and matter.
So, where does an idea like this even come from? It's not a modern invention, not at all. It's a persistent intellectual current that has surfaced repeatedly throughout history, cloaked in different philosophical and theological garments. To understand its contemporary form, we really must trace its ancient roots.
One of the oldest and most systematic denials of matter comes from the Advaita Vedanta school of Hindu philosophy. Here, the only true reality is Brahman, a formless, infinite, and unchanging consciousness. Everything else, the entire physical cosmos, our bodies, our individual selves, is considered Maya, a cosmic illusion, a divine act of magic that conceals the true nature of being.
So there we have it, the core dogma. Yet it immediately presents us with a practical problem. If the world is illusory, what are we to make of hunger, of illness, or the simple, undeniable pull of gravity? The philosophy insists upon the unreality of the world, whilst the body most forcefully insists upon its material demands. This illusion, it would seem, operates under remarkably consistent rules.
Now, in the Western tradition, the most famous formulation of this idea comes from the 18th century Irish philosopher Bishop George Berkeley. His principle, esse asperpi, to be is to be perceived, argues that matter as a substance independent of mind simply doesn't exist. An apple, for example, is just the collection of ideas, redness, sweetness, roundness. Its existence depends upon being perceived, and its continuity is only ensured because it is perpetually perceived by the mind of God.
And right here, we encounter the profound chasm between Berkeley's idealism and modern science. If existence requires a perceiver, what are we to do with the vast cosmic ages before the evolution of consciousness? What about the formation of stars, the geological shaping of the Earth, the fossil records of creatures that lived and died millions of years before human mind could ever conceive of them? Modern cosmology shows us a universe that evolved according to physical laws long before any observer was present to witness it.
Which brings us to the modern era, where the genuinely strange and counterintuitive discoveries of quantum mechanics have been, well, they've been twisted and misappropriated. A new breed of mystics has attempted to hijack the language of physics to lend a veneer of scientific credibility to this ancient anti-materialist dogma.
This is the kind of claim you hear so often in certain circles. It suggests that physicists themselves have dismantled the material world, proving it to be a mere construct of consciousness.
It's a very seductive idea, of course, wrapping spiritual belief in the authoritative cloak of hard science. But it is a profound and, I would argue, deliberate misrepresentation.
Albert Einstein's response on this matter is as concise as it is devastating. The scientific community simply does not endorse such a mystical interpretation. In fact, the very practice of physics presupposes a real, external, material reality that is there to be studied.
So let's be absolutely crystal clear about the most commonly abused concept here, the observer effect. In quantum mysticism, the observer is romanticized as a conscious human mind shaping reality simply to the act of looking. The scientific reality is far more mundane. The observer is not a person, it's an interaction. It is any physical measuring device, a photon detector, a Geiger counter, that interacts with the quantum system, thereby forcing it out of a state of superposition. Consciousness plays no role in it whatsoever.
This brings us to a fundamental contradiction. Not in the physics, mind you, but in the behavior of those who profess to deny physical reality. We're going to explore the deep psychological discomfort known as cognitive dissonance, which arises when one's actions are in direct conflict with one's stated beliefs.
And this concept of cognitive dissonance, that profound internal tension we feel when our actions contradict what we say we believe, is absolutely key here. For those who claim matter is an illusion, daily life must be a constant theater of this dissonance, as their every single action betrays their philosophy.
This matrix lays the conflict bare. Just observe the column of theoretical claims, the body is an illusion, and then compare it to the column of action in a moment of crisis, the immediate use of modern antibiotics and MRI machines. You see, in every practical test, the materialist worldview prevails. The actions always affirm the reality that the words deny.
I mean, these are the daily hypocrisies, aren't they? They broadcast their disdain for the material world using the most advanced material technology. They treat their illusory illnesses with the triumphs of molecular biology. They demand payment in very real currency from their simulated publishers. And, most tellingly of all, when faced with sudden physical danger, they instinctively flinch and recoil, their bodies asserting a belief in reality that their minds pretend to have overcome.
So to counter such abstract speculation, we now turn to two powerful affirmations of materialism. One is a monument of calm, analytic philosophy. The other, a grim and harrowing testament, literally written in blood.
In 1939, the philosopher G.E. Moore offered what may be the most famous refutation of idealism. Standing before his audience, he simply held up one hand and said, "Here is one hand." Then, holding up the other, he added, "And here is another." His point was devastatingly simple. The direct, undeniable certainty we have of our own hands is far stronger than the convoluted, abstract premises required for philosophical skepticism. The proof of an external world is right here.
Moore's proof was one of philosophical clarity. But now, we must turn to a proof of a much darker, much more visceral nature. A historical case where the commitment to materialism was taken to its most tragic and most absolute conclusion.
These are the final words of Beşir Fuad, an Ottoman intellectual and one of the first Turkish materialists. In 1887, to prove that consciousness is nothing more than a function of material, biological processes, he scientifically documented his own suicide. As his lifeblood drained away, he coolly recorded the physiological sensations, the fading of his senses, the cessation of thought. His was the ultimate, tragic demonstration that when the material substrate fails, when the blood ceases to carry oxygen to the brain, consciousness does not float free, it simply ends.
And so we have arrived at the climax of our investigation. Here, the philosophical debate ceases. Here, all appeals to consciousness, illusion, or mysticism fall silent. We return to our thought experiment, to the final physical proof delivered by the unforgiving mathematics of physics and biology.
You're looking at the language that governs the event. Kinetic energy equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared. This is not a philosophical proposition. It's a mathematical description of a physical reality, an objective arbiter that is completely indifferent to human belief or desire.
So let's actually quantify the force involved here. A 10-ton truck traveling at 150 kilometers per hour possesses approximately 8.68 megajoules of kinetic energy. This is not some vague, vibrating energy of the mystics. This is a specific, colossal, and quantifiable destructive potential, grounded in the objective properties of mass and velocity.
And this is what occurs when that energy is transferred to a human body. The forces involved do not negotiate with belief systems. They act upon the material structure of bone and tissue. The result is determined not by the state of one's consciousness, but by the material limits of biology.
To truly appreciate the scale of this event, you must consider this disparity. The cortical bone of a human femur, the thigh bone, has a known stress limit, measured at approximately 71.5 megapascals. The force delivered by the impact is orders of magnitude greater. No philosophical argument can bridge this physical gap. The outcome is a matter of material science, catastrophic structural failure. What follows is a grim sequence of events, each a predictable consequence of physical law. The impact force vastly exceeds the bone's stress limit, causing it to shatter. Tens of thousands of newtons of force tear through ligaments. The body is thrown against the vehicle in a biomechanical event known as a rap projection. The subsequent impacts cause skull fracture and devastating damage to the brain, while the immense deceleration leads to the catastrophic rupture of internal organs. Each step is a grim lecture on the primacy of matter.
And this leads us to the final, and I think unanswerable question for the idealist. If the world is merely an illusion, a dream, a user interface, why is that illusion governed by such precise and unforgiving physical laws? Why does this supposed simulation adhere with mathematical perfection to the Young's modulus of cortical bone? The precision of the destruction is the most powerful argument for the reality of the material being destroyed.
In the end, the conclusion is simply inescapable. One may construct elaborate philosophies in the safety of a study, but reality will always have the final word. A truth moving at over 41 meters per second does not enter into a debate. It's not interested in our perceptions or our spiritual theories. It simply is, and its laws are not optional. They demand not our belief, but our absolute compliance.